Islamism, Hotep, peace gods, peace goddesses, Shalom Mishkael, Assalamu alaikum salam. I self-law am master, created in the likeness and image of his most holy ancient, who is and was and will forever be the true and living holy of holies. Made fully and complete, perfect in his image and likeness, arm, leg, arm, head, who is Allah, master, able, noble, generator, operator, destroyer. I reserve all my rights without prejudice, without recourse. This weather, feel like I'm being followed around by a weather machine. It has been raining cold for the past 2 weeks. The police waited till we got out the car and towed our car from the grocery parking lot in the cold, freezing rain. And now today, I was gonna walk the affidavits to the police station, but this weather is hindering that. So we just keep working. We just keep working on it. I want to tell a story. This story is about a group of haters. Group of maggots. It was about, let's see, it's 2019. It was about 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was a freshman at Morehouse College, y'all. Didn't have any financial aid, didn't have any money, didn't have any family to support. But I drove out there to Atlanta and got myself in there by banging on the door every day for a month. I was even going to class without my classes being registered. It was no way I was going to be denied. So I finally got in. After a long battle with the homosexual administration at the front of the gate. Finally got in, got classes registered. Didn't have books, but I made do. So during the middle of the semester, I get a call to come to the freshman dean's office. Dean Darden. Look him up. And if you're listening to the sound of my voice, Dean Darden, you know exactly who I am. So I get into the office, and I'm not sure why I'm there. And I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And I'm waiting. And at that time, the dean of the freshman class, his office was in the student center, MLK building, I think, one of those. So, anyways, it was closing time, and everyone was leaving, and the office was basically closing. I'm still sitting there waiting. So, there were some fraternity students in there, a couple alphas and masons and megas, and I thought they were just, working in the office, how students work in the office. So finally, one of them calls me and tells me to come in. I go in. Now I'm gonna back this up about 2 months before that. About 2 months before that, I was going to class, and then I will hustle over to Clark, hide my clothes in the football locker room, take a shower, go to class. If I needed to sleep, I probably either sleep at the laundromat on campus at Morehouse or something like that. So I was sleeping at the laundromat one night, and the student campus police, they came to fuck with me. So just so happened that one of them wasn't he wasn't a maggot. So he says, look, come over here. We're gonna take you, because I know one of the deans, dean of the dorms. He'll look out for you. So I said, all right. So they took me to this dean of the freshman dorm, Dean Wynn. Dean Wynn, yeah, he has a twin brother who is head of one of the Catholic, whatever, some churches around the campus. They got a church over there. Yeah, they're a bunch of short and curly maggots. And you probably don't know what that means, but after the story you will. So anyways, I get introduced to the short and curly maggot Dean Wynn. And he's a tall, dark fellow. Very friendly, very feminine, very flirtatious. So Dean, he welcomes me and tells me I can stay in here in his private quarters. He has an extra room until my financial aid and everything gets worked out, and I get a scholarship and so on and so forth. So thank you. So now I wake up. I'm going to class every day. I got some shelter, and one morning, about a week into it, I come and there's a bunch of fraternity alphas and some other ones up in there with the dean, and they're all acting weird and strange, and it's mainly the feminine ones, the homosexual ones. So I left, went about my business. Came back when nobody was there, went to bed, got up, went to class. So that next morning, I got up. I had stayed up pretty late because I had to study. Went to take a shower. I come back out. This dumbass Wynn is laying butt ass naked, playing with himself, with the door wide open, looking directly at me. And to be real, that day, the first thing came to my mind, because the kitchen was right there, and there was a big old knife right there. But cooler minds prevailed, so I just left. I never came back after that, right? So, all right, so now we're gonna fast forward about more than halfway through the semester. I get called to Dean Darden's office. And I had a car, but my car had got towed, and I had to go get my car, and I had got my car back by then. I had gotten my car back by then, and so Anyways, like I said, I was waiting in that night. Dean Darden finally showed up. So okay, I'm in. What's up? I'm thinking maybe I got a scholarship, or maybe gonna help me with some financial aid so I can get my own dorm or buy books and shit like that. Okay, so Dean Darden and his group of faggot frats proceeded to uh, attempt to um, get into my head or something. They were laughing and making fun of me, and he tells me that I'm no longer a student here. And so I'm like, man, what the fuck is you talking about? So he says, freshmen are not allowed to have cars. I said, that's bullshit. You can't kick me out of school. And all these dudes over here laughing at me and calling me names. I never met none of these faggots, but they don't know me. So it's like a Twilight Zone at this moment. I'm like, what the fuck? This is unbelievable. So Dean Darden kicks me out at the end of the semester, and I have to go back to Texas, where I came from before I got there, and come back without a car. He says. So man, I was, I was crushed to say the least. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And he was laughing at me and basically telling me, get the fuck out, don't come back. I never met this dumbass nigga. So I get back to Texas, get back to where I'm from, and my mother's in jail. I mean, like a hospital jail, and people don't somehow trick my mother into jurisdiction. She worked. She worked at their post office. She didn't know any better. We didn't know. She didn't know. I know that it was a cracker post office and not the actual American post office she was working at. So after years, and now that I can see what's going on, I know that they were in there terrorizing her. So, anyways, I get back, and I'm feeling like I'm in a Twilight Zone. Couldn't believe that happened. And so, one night, I began to have a conversation with my creator. And the conversation lasted all night long. I mean, literally all night long. and the next morning when I woke up, the color in the atmosphere had come back. It was no longer a Twilight Zone looking atmosphere I was walking in. So it took me about maybe 8 months to decide I'm going back with my car. So I get back to Atlanta. I basically go through the same bullshit. I mean, I'm already a student now, but now I got to fight with Dean. Can't think of his name, but he's another maggot homosexual that was in charge of financial aid. Who, as soon as he saw I was not accepting his friendly faggot flirtatious invitations, and I became his enemy, and I couldn't get my financial aid. So I had to go back through that again. And after a 2 or 3 month battle, I'm back in. I got my financial aid. And guess who I run across? Dean Darden. Dean motherfucking Darden. But it was something different about old Dean. Dean had someone split his head open from the center of his forehead to the back of his neck. I said, what happened to Dean Darden? They said he had to have brain surgery. I was like, oh. I never told anyone the story. No one. But when he looked me in my eyes, every time he passed by me, his head was down in shame. Every fucking time. And that wasn't the last battle I had. I've been having these battles with these maggot faggots my whole life. Like, even like now, over here in Temple 80 in Los Angeles, the so-called Moorish Post Temple, where it's nothing but maggot faggots in there, with the intent to oppress their own kind. If you are listening to the sound of my voice, you have been warned. You have been served notice. Touch not mine anointed. So I see there is much, much work to be done as I demonstrate. I encourage others who are surrounded by maggot faggots who want to see you down, who know more about you than you know about yourself. Look to the heavens from whence cometh thy help. Stand firm, knowing one word, that so many individuals presume they know the meaning of. Even myself at one time, I presumed to know the meaning of the word faith. Oh, faith means the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Oh, okay, well, that's what it says right there. Who wrote that? Who told him to write that? Because what I know faith means, it means that my creator is faithful. Faithful in what? Faithful in seeing his creation perfected to the fullness and stature of himself. That word faith don't have shit to do with you. Us, we ain't nobody. We not nobody. Without what? Without the spirit that comes from our creator, which is like the animals. Animals are intelligent. Animals can think. Yet an animal cannot invoke the spirit of its creator. By the word of his testimony. And the will of his might. See, This demonstration is not for individuals that say to you, "Oh, you ain't got shit, so why should I listen to you?" You know why? Because those are they who have disqualified themselves from receiving the keys of life. If we think we're going to receive the keys of life from the most flashy, rich, and wealthy, I mean, unless you're like the lady who pressed through the crowd until she touched the king and was healed, you're gonna have to fight to get. But I mean, just the average, it's the average, wealthy person you see on the street. You think they're gonna tell you how they got there? No. So, how much more would the spirit require before it just gives you secrets? Before it just gives us what you might call powers, keys. To whom much is given, much is required. That is law. What is required? Well, one of our most noble and honorable brothers, one of a most holy and righteous stature, he made the claim that the uplifting of fallen humanity is what is required. You see? So these maggots, they like the people in the church when you pass the collection plate, they steal out the plate. They put $2 in and take $5, talking about I take change. And even though in the scriptures it describes Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed by 2 angels, you should look at that word. Angels. So if you're expecting 2 alien-looking birds that half look like caucasoids, you are deceived. Only the pure in heart shall know. Shall know what? Shall know thyself. See? A year before I left to go to Atlanta and get in Morehouse, I met this old looking caucasoid. He could have been a mulatto. But he's very peaceful and gentle. And he always dressed like he was a farmer. He always dressed like he was a worker, he had to go work on the farm or work picking up trash or something. But he would always walk off and hop in the Lamborghini. It's unfortunate that we exist in a generation where the illusion is so strong, especially with our youth, our children, even some of us. The illusion of what? The truth. That no matter what you do, you can't war against the good. Goodness abounds. This story has been told for ages. Malefic was not created to war against benefic. You idiot. You fool. Malefic and benefic are not two opposing forces in the state of destroying one another. You see? Your lower self, who the Caucasoid told you is Satan and got you scared of, is your lower self. Let's talk about our lower self. That part of us that is intertwined, that is so much a part of us. Let's talk about our lower self. We have a higher self and a lower self. We have a benefic state and a malefic state. We were created this way, not by accident. You see? But the maggot factors would have you believe that you should fear your lower state, and then they come to you in a fierce lower state, with the presumption that you're going to fear them until they meet the most fiercest higher state. You see, my brother said, greater works than me shall thou do. You see me raise Lazarus from the dead. That's nothing. Your lower self, indeed, if one was to look upon their lower self and was given the eyes to see, it is quite possible such a fear would overcome you that you could destroy yourself. Likewise, hey, look at that. That's a beautiful hummingbird. You see that? Hey, hummingbird. Think fast like the hummingbird, my brother, my son, my daughter. And the wisdom of the hummingbird is a magnificent story. Our lower self, Satan, the devil, Lucifer, as we've been taught since we came into this current realm. It is that part of yourself, ourself, that, how can I describe it? It is written that it is that part of ourselves that wars with God. That's how it was translated. Wars with God. Wars with the good. our higher self being the good. And why does it war with the good? Well, there could be some presumptions we could assume. One is that when you are ignoring your good, then you are contracting your lower self to run the show, to be in control, to be the driver. And a lower self without balance, unchecked, becomes a malignant self, a self-destructive, because a lower self has no compass. And without a compass, a lower self wars in circles, never to escape. While one's higher self observes, while one's higher self is that still quiet voice that protects. It's like a security alarm system to let you know, if you're aware, that lower self is out of bounds or is should not be should not be there doing that or leading you there. But when all we see here on TV, radio is lower selves in prominent positions, we have no idea or sense of either of the two. One's lower self is likened to one's soul. What is under our feet here? Soil. What do we plant in soil? Life. You see? You see, it is written the soil must be tended. The soil must be kept. You see? You can't grow food um, on soil that you don't know how to take care of, or the food will die and it will destroy you and your family. Nature even tells us the perfection of our master is impervious, except to the ignorant. To the ignorant, it is void. You see? They know not. And that is a dangerous thing because it will separate us from the divine. And divine nature comes before contract law. Divine law comes before maritime, criminal, traffic, any of that bullshit. Divine law, the law of nature. You see? Now, once one realizes that there are two selves, a lower self and a higher self, then you have awakened. And when you awaken, fear not, for your lower self will stand before you, will sit before you, will bow before you. And I argue that there have been our most noble and honorable ancestors who were of the spirit that they even ministered to their own lower selves. Thus holding the law all is one. Now there are some of us, we awaken and we see our lower self before us, and fear may attempt to come in and distract, thus binding the lower self back to you. Because fear and love cannot do the same too. This is what you're supposed to know. We're supposed to know. Especially by the age of 5. You see, when you're sleeping and you feel that energy and you're trying to wake up and you can't wake up and now you're scared. That is your higher self attempting to awaken you, that you may see your lower self for what truly or she truly is. So wake up, open your eyes, and see. Stand and see the goodness of the Lord. Who is the Lord? Thou art Lord of the earth. Or lay there in fear and be swallowed into the depths of Sheol. That it's our choice. So in a sense, there's divine contract law. See? So now you've met your lower self. You realize your lower self and your higher self are two beings that coexist in you. Now wait a minute. So there's 3 of us now. Is that what they call the Father, the Son, and the Spirit? That might be what they call it. Is that what they call the yin and the yang? Maybe what they call it. We see that the lower self is a mighty warrior, not to be mistaken. A mighty hunter, like Nimrod. The lower self as we have witnessed, can take over nations, can destroy heritages, nationalities, and peoples, and lands. The lower self is mighty, powerful, created that way for a purpose. Like in the movie Matrix, Smith was rather powerful. And Neo realized he and Smith were the same. except for one thing. The lower self is not invited into the temple, or rather, the holies, the Christ, the mind of Christ, they call it. Not invited. Even where we read, and the sons of God did gather, and Satan showed up. Oh, he was a son. He wasn't invited. So he came because our lower self always has something to prove. Without balance comes to naught. So Satan shows up and says to the Creator, they only honor you because you give them everything they ask for. Now I know you've been sitting in your church for 40, 50 years, and you heard the story of Job, and you never listened. You was too busy saying hallelujah. Glory. Praise you, God. Hallelujah. Not hearing a word that was said. Wanting to look good and everybody else to see that you're a real Christian. I live this. I eat, work, sleep, church. But it says right there, Satan says, because you give them everything they ask. So the Creator says, well, since you're so smart and you know everything, prove it. And if you go outside the bounds that I have laid, then you will be destroyed. So Satan proceeds to lay traps. Satan proceeds to plant poison everywhere in Job's life. Job had 17 daughters. They all died. Job had 10,000 buffalo and 30,000 sheep, and they all died. You see, Satan was jealous. He was angry because Job was so set in his higher self that Satan could not get in. He could not come. He could not. Let me show you. You remember the story where they said Jesus rode in the dirt? It's like a circle around you when you're in your higher self, and it goes wherever you go. So Satan was so angry that he goes and he attempts to blaspheme the Creator. So the story says, the parable says, of type and shadow, Job was at a loss of everything. And his wife says to him, why don't you just curse your Creator and die? He has left you. There is nothing good on the earth. she was in pain. Sometimes, a lot of us, we say things out of pain and hurt. We lose something or lose someone. And we say things we may not mean, but it really hurts. And at the time, that's what she said. Yet Job had already seen himself. He had already seen Satan with his own two eyes. So he knew goodness abounds. Yet the physical pain and suffering of the physical losses was a lot to bear, even for a man set on dwelling in his higher self. Even. So Job says, no, that is not true, woman. Do not ever speak that way again. Goodness abounds. And Job went away from his wife into his private quarters, and he wept for the loss of his children. And he began to have a conversation with his Creator. And this was at the point when Satan's claim had been rebutted. Because in that conversation, Job did not ask for anything. He didn't ask to have his children given back to him. He didn't ask to have his animals given back to him. Job said, Master, what is this? What are my orders from this point? So, very different. It's like a soldier who's been captured at war and doesn't give up the information. No matter how much he's tortured. And the story goes on to say Job was restored. Instead of 17 daughters, Job had 40 daughters and sons, and he was restored, and Satan was bound to the pits and in prison. To come near Job never again. I remember Job. Joab. Hayabi. I remember our forefathers. They are resilient in their stand of higher self. This is what it means to be a noble. Amore. Resilience in one's higher self. And let any man who would war against such have a stone tied about their necks and cast into the sea. So y'all want to mimic malefic, malignant behavior, I give you your just reward. Demonstrate, family. Study. We must study ourselves the most. Study ourselves the most. Usually when there's someone in your life walking with you, as the elders used to say, you have someone in your life, or a partner, a spouse, or a best friend, you can start to study yourself through that person, because nature, because the spirit has put you together for a purpose, for that very purpose. The energy drew together, the energy of that individual and your individual energy drew to one another for a purpose. Especially if you're always getting mad at your best friend or at your partner or at your mate. If you really are one who seeks to exist nobly and imperviously in a higher self, you're gonna notice everything I really get mad at them about, I either used to do or I still accidentally do sometimes. That is studying my oneself. See, the study begins with the intent, and the intent is knowing that, wait a minute, I might do that too. Let me check myself. You have a wife, you have a husband, you're constantly getting angry and mad at them. That is the spirit giving opportunity to look deeper inside of oneself. Self-study. The mirror. The eyes are the windows to the soul. You look through the eyes of your mate or your partner, your best friend, that one that's closer to you, you look through their eyes and you see eternity for one. And in eternity is what? Is the spirit. Where does the spirit come from? Creator. What is the spirit made of? Wisdom, strength, and beauty. Among other traits and gifts. You look into the eyes of your enemy and you will still see eternity. You will still see the beginning of creation, which is the creator. You see? Someone hurts me or wrongs me, I look them in the eyes and I tell them, I'm sure you are a most noble and worthy man or woman. And when I look them in their eyes, I make sure all of eternity, all of the spirit world, and all of the realms of the Creator has heard my claim. And when that happens, if that person is not noble and honorable as I have claimed them to be through the eyes of the Creator, then the elements shall administer due process. They shall be found and when they are found, they have a choice to make, to be corrected or to be destroyed. If I have a partner, or if I have a child, or if I have a best friend, I'm always screaming at them, always getting mad at them, and I see that they accept correction willingly, then they go a different path. They will seek their lower selves and separate one from the other with balance and perfection. The other will be destroyed. The one who does not accept correction, but rebuts and wars. Some societies call it the evil eye. Call it whatever you want to call it. Doesn't change what it is. So, as we move forward in demonstrating our metaphysical, our divine and natural, precepts, principles, let us know that Satan is about to and fro. Sometimes even sitting next to you, seeking to devour, destroy that protection that one's higher self gives. Now, when there is balance, we realize our lower self is the stone of which we sharpen our blades. See, my grandfather, he wore a ring. And anytime he commanded his lower self, the lower self obeyed. So if he wanted to destroy an unrighteous nation, he would command his lower self, and his lower self would obey. If he wanted to destroy an unholy nation, his higher self would command his lower self. And the nation would be destroyed that was unholy and unrighteous in his sight. Our enemies know our stories. They've studied our stories. And some of those who look like our enemies are not. Believe it or not, a lot of our enemies look just like us. You see? We outnumber conquerors always everywhere, so think about it. A lot of our enemies look just like us. You see, and a lot of our enemies have taken an oath to live, breathe, and have their being in their lower self, knowingly having all knowledge of the principle therewith. See, they took an oath. You took an oath to abide in your lower self, you fool. Nothing can save you. You can't even save yourself. You should fall on your sword. That's the only way to reclaim your nobility. Let your own blood cry. So, from the age of 10, 11 months, these principles will be instilled. These principles are the foundation that must be laid in my home. I love my people who are the inhabitants of the earth. I hope the best for our people and not the worst. Perseverance is natural for us. If, fellas, you have a mate, a woman, um, and she thugs it with you. I mean, super hard, without even having to say it too much. And then one day you hear her say, we can suffer through it." That's a real one. Ladies, you got one a man, and he suffers through it with you or thugs it out with you. That's how I measure friendship. Everyone doesn't have the same. You have to measure it the same way. That's just personally how I measure it. Whether it's a family member, whether it's a love interest, whatever. The one who perseveres, the meek, shall receive the keys to the kingdom.